My name is Fiona Vale, and I'm 37 years old. For most of my adult life, I worked in hospital records, which means I spent my days around forms, signatures, patient numbers, missing authorizations, and people who forgot to fill out the second page of a document. It was quiet work. Predictable work. The kind of work where a mistake usually meant someone used the wrong middle initial or scanned a discharge form upside down. So when a detective came to the front desk on a Tuesday morning and asked for me by my full legal name, I thought it had to be about a patient file. He was polite, mid-40s, grey suit, tired eyes, the kind of man who looked like he apologized to vending machines when they stole his money. He showed his badge to my supervisor, then looked at me and said, "Ms. Vale, do you have a few minutes to speak privately?" I remember the exact sound the printer made behind me. 3 clicks, a pause, then the tray sliding out. That is the kind of thing you remember when your life is about to split open. Not the big dramatic thing, the small mechanical sound right before it. We went into the little conference room near compliance. It had a round table, 2 chairs, a wall clock that was always 4 minutes fast, and a fake plant nobody watered because nobody had to. The detective set a folder on the table. Not a thin folder. A real one. The kind with tabs. "Before I ask anything," he said, "I need to confirm your identity." I gave him my license. He compared it to something in the file, then looked back at me. "Your full name is Fiona Elise Vale." "Yes. Date of birth." I told him. He wrote it down, even though it was already printed in front of him. Then he opened the folder and turned a page toward me. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. That sounds strange because I worked with records every day. I knew how to read them. I knew where names went, where dates went, where seals mattered and where they didn't. But there are some things your brain refuses to organize right away. My name was at the top. Fiona Elise Vale. My father's name was listed underneath. Richard Vale. And beside the word status in small black type, it said deceased. The detective let me read for a second. Then he said very carefully, "According to these records, you died in 2009. I stared at the page. I did not cry. I did not gasp. I did not throw the folder across the room. I just looked at my own name sitting there like it belonged to someone else, like I was a file that had been closed, boxed, and forgotten in a room with bad lighting. 2009, I said. "Yes. That's not possible." "No, ma'am, it is." He turned another page. "There's something else." I looked at him then. His face had changed, not much, but enough. He had the expression people get when they know the next sentence will make less sense than the first. "There is a second birth record attached to your identity," he said. "Same name, same father, different birthday." I looked down. There it was. A birthday that was not mine. A day I had never celebrated. A date someone had placed over my life like a sticker on a mislabeled box. I stared at the screen of his tablet after he slid it closer to me. My name, my death, my second birthday. And then I started laughing. Not a small laugh. Not a polite, nervous laugh. I laughed so hard I had to put one hand over my mouth and the other on the edge of the table to steady myself. The detective froze. That was when I realized how it must have looked. A woman sitting across from a police detective, reading documents that said she died 11 years earlier, laughing like someone had told her an inside joke. He waited a moment. Then he asked, "Has something like this happened before?" I wiped under one eye, not because I was crying, not yet. I said, "Not officially." And that was the first time his face changed completely. Because he understood, before I explained anything, that I was not laughing because the situation was funny. I was laughing because my father had finally put paperwork behind a lie he had been telling in one form or another since I was 16. When I was 16, Richard Vale told our family that I had run away. He told them I hated them. He told them I never wanted to see any of them again. For 11 years they believed him. Some of them mourned me. Some resented me. Some probably did both. And I built an entire life, thinking the people I loved had simply decided I was too difficult to look for. But sitting in that conference room, with a detective's folder open in front of me, I learned something worse. My father had not just removed me from the family. He had buried me. Before I take you back to where it started, please hit like and subscribe. Tell me honestly in the comments what you would do if a detective walked into your job and told you your family had believed you were dead for years. Would you call them first? Would you call a lawyer? Or would you sit there like I did, wondering why the person who was supposed to protect you needed the world to think you were gone? Now let me take you back. Because before there were death records and false birthdays, and a detective with a file full of impossible dates, there was a blue cedar box on a little girl's dresser. And for a long time, I thought that box was just where my mother kept proof that she loved me. I grew up in a white house at the end of a quiet street where every lawn looked trimmed enough to be judged. Our neighbors had bird feeders and flagpoles and motion lights that clicked on when raccoons crossed the driveway at night. From the outside, our house looked calm. It looked steady. It looked like the kind of place where people remembered birthdays and wrote thank you notes. My mother used to open the kitchen windows when it rained. She said rain made a house tell the truth. I never knew what she meant by that when I was little. I just remember the smell of wet grass, the sound of tires whispering past the curb, and my mother standing at the sink with her sleeves pushed to her elbows like she was listening for something under the ordinary noise of the day. Her name was Lillian. She was not loud, she did not take up space the way my father did. Richard could enter a room and make everyone adjust, not because he yelled, he almost never yelled. That was part of what made him hard to explain later. He was calm, careful, respected. He wore pressed shirts and remembered people's job titles. He knew how to make concern sound like authority. My mother was different. She noticed when my socks were damp. She put extra butter on toast without asking. She remembered the names of stuffed animals I had stopped carrying years earlier. And every year on my birthday, she would tell me the same thing while lighting the candles. You arrived early, she'd say, smiling in that tired, soft way mothers smile when a memory hurts and comforts them at the same time. But you knew exactly when you wanted to be here. That was how I knew my birthday. Not from paper. Not from a certificate. From her voice. When I was 9, she gave me the blue cedar box. It was small enough to fit in my lap, painted a faded blue that looked grey in the evening and brighter near the window. It smelled faintly like wood, dust, and the lavender sachets she kept in her dresser drawers. She sat beside me on my bed and placed it between us like it was heavier than it looked. This is yours, she said. I ran my fingers along the lid. What's in it? Pieces of you. I remember laughing because I thought she meant teeth or hair, something gross and funny. But when she opened it, everything inside was ordinary. A hospital bracelet with my name printed in tiny letters. A folded birthday card with a yellow duck on it. A little silver key tied with blue thread. A photograph of me and my mother standing in front of a lake cabin I barely remembered. And a note in her handwriting. You belong somewhere, even when people forget how to say it. I did not understand why a mother would write something like that to a child who still lived down the hall from her. I only knew that her hand trembled a little when she tucked the note back inside. Keep this safe, Fiona, she said. From who? She looked toward the hallway before answering. From time, she said. That was how my mother lied when she was trying not to frighten me. And that was the first thing I remembered years later, when the detective showed me the birthday that was not mine. Because my mother had given me proof of the real one. And my father had spent the rest of my life trying to make sure I could not use it. After my mother gave me the box, I started keeping it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Not hidden exactly. Just private. I was 9, so privacy meant putting a library book on top of it, and assuming nobody would ever look underneath. For a while, nothing changed. My mother still opened the windows when it rained. She still wrote grocery lists on the backs of envelopes. She still pressed her thumb to my forehead when I said I didn't feel well, even though we owned a thermometer. But after the blue box, I noticed little things. My father did not like closed doors. If my bedroom door was shut, he would knock once and open it before I answered. He always had a reason. Laundry, a misplaced receipt, a question about school, something that sounded normal if you repeated it to someone else. But he looked around when he came in. Not obviously. Just enough. His eyes would move from my desk to my dresser, from the dresser to the nightstand, then back to me. "You're getting old enough to keep this room neater," he would say. "It is neater." He would smile without smiling. Neat is not the same as organized. That was my father. He could make a sentence sound like housekeeping and judgment at the same time. Richard Vale was not the kind of man people suspected. That mattered later. He coached Little League for one season even though Mark was already too old to play. He shook hands firmly. He stood with both feet planted when he talked to other men. At church picnics and school events, people called him dependable. My mother called him Richard when she was tired. "Not honey. Not dear. Richard." I did not understand the difference until much later. Mark was 12 then, tall for his age, with scabbed knees and a habit of acting annoyed when he was being kind. He used to walk on the outside of the sidewalk when we went to the corner store, like cars might suddenly jump the curb and choose me. Once, when a boy at school called me Weird Fiona because I liked reading medical dictionaries, Mark waited by the bike racks and told him to apologize. The boy did. Mark never mentioned it again. That was how he loved people back then, quietly, like he did not want credit because credit would ruin it. But even with Mark, there were rules in our house that nobody admitted were rules. Do not correct Dad in front of people. Do not ask Mom why she gets quiet after phone calls. Do not mention the lake cabin unless Mom brings it up first. And never interrupt when Dad is in the study. The study was at the back of the house past the laundry room with a heavy door and a brass knob that was always cold. My father kept file boxes in there, bank statements, insurance papers, tax folders labeled by year. He had a black metal cabinet with a tiny key on his ring. Sometimes I heard my parents speaking through the wall. Not arguing. Arguing would have been easier to name. Their voices stayed low. My mother's would rise just enough for me to hear one word. Fiona. Then my father's voice would flatten everything again. One evening, not long after my 10th birthday, I came downstairs because I wanted water. The kitchen light was off, but the study door was open a few inches. My mother stood beside my father's desk in her robe. My father was holding a manila folder. I only saw it for a second before he closed it, but I saw the picture on top. The lake cabin. The same one from the blue box. My mother turned and saw me in the hallway. Her face changed so quickly I almost convinced myself I imagined it. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "I'm thirsty." She came to me right away, too fast, like she wanted to block the doorway with her body. My father stayed where he was. "It's late," he said. Not angry, not warm either. "Just final." My mother got me water. Her hands were steady that time. That was almost worse. At the stairs, she touched my shoulder and whispered, "Some things are boring grown-up things, don't worry about them." I nodded because children are trained to accept explanations that make adults comfortable. But I worried. After that, the lake cabin stopped feeling like a place in a photograph. It felt like a word people put away when I entered the room. Elaine came into our lives slowly. At first she was just Elaine from the office, then Elaine who helped with the fundraiser. Then Elaine sitting at our kitchen table with a ceramic mug she had not taken from the cabinet herself. She was pretty in a careful way, pale nails, smooth hair, a voice that never landed hard on anything. She brought lemon bars once and said, "I hope I'm not intruding." My mother said, "Of course not." My father said nothing. I remember that because silence from him usually meant approval. Elaine was kind to me in the way adults are kind to children they do not plan to know deeply. She asked about school. She said my dress was sweet. She called Mark responsible and my father generous. My mother washed Elaine's mug after she left, even though we had a dishwasher. She stood at the sink for a long time. The rain had started again. Thin, steady rain tapping the window over the sink. "Mom." She looked over, "Yes." "Do you like Elaine's?" She smiled a little. That's a grown-up question. That meant no. A year later, my mother got sick. Not all at once. That is the part people leave out when they talk about illness. It does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it starts with naps, missed appointments, a hand resting too long on the counter, a calendar with more circles on it than usual. My father became very efficient. He made lists, he arranged medication bottles in rows, he spoke to doctors in a voice that made nurses answer quickly. Everyone said he was handling it well. At home, he began moving papers. Folders disappeared from the kitchen drawer. My mother's old address book went missing, then returned with pages tucked differently. The study door stayed locked more often. One afternoon, when my mother was sleeping, my father found me sitting on my bedroom floor with the blue box open. I had taken out the hospital bracelet and was trying to read the tiny printed numbers. He stood in the doorway. I did not hear him knock. "What is that?" he asked. I closed the lid halfway. "Mom gave it to me." "I know who gave it to you." His voice was calm, but something in the room tightened. He stepped inside and held out his hand. "Let me see." I did not want to give it to him. I could not have explained why. There was nothing secret in it, not to me, just a bracelet, a card, a key, a picture, a note. Still, my fingers stayed on the lid. "It's mine," I said. His eyes moved to my hand. Then he softened his face. That was another thing he could do. He could put kindness on like a coat. "Fiona," he said, "family keeps things safe together." From downstairs, my mother called my name. Not loudly. Just once. My father's hand lowered. For a second, we both listened. Then he smiled again, put it away. I did. That night, my mother came into my room after everyone was asleep. She moved slowly by then, one hand on the wall, the other holding the edge of her sweater closed. She opened my drawer, checked that the box was still there, and let out a breath I was not supposed to hear. "Mom," I whispered. She sat on the edge of my bed. The hall light cut across her face, making her look older than she had that morning. "Don't let anyone make you feel foolish for keeping what matters," she said. I asked, "Is Dad anyone?" She closed her eyes. Only for a second. Then she kissed my forehead and said, "Sleep now." She died 7 months later. And after the funeral, before the flowers on the dining room table had even turned brown, my father came into my room with a cardboard storage box in his hands. He said we needed to organize. He said grief made people sentimental. He said sentimental things had a way of keeping families stuck. Then he looked at my nightstand. Not at me. At the drawer. And very quietly he asked, "Where did your mother put that blue box?" I told him I didn't know. That was the first lie I remember telling my father without feeling guilty. He stood in my doorway with the cardboard storage box against his hip, waiting for me to correct myself. I was 11 then, old enough to understand that adults could ask questions they already knew the answer to, but too young to understand why. "It was in your drawer," he said. I looked at the floor. I moved it. "Where?" "I don't remember." He watched me for a long moment. Then he nodded, like I had disappointed him in a way he had expected. "That's what grief does," he said. "It makes children cling to things instead of people." I wanted to say the box was not instead of my mother. It was what I had left of her. But I did not have the words yet, and even if I had, my father was very good at making words feel childish once they left my mouth. So I kept quiet. The truth was, I had moved the blue box the night after my mother warned me. I put it inside an old backpack in the back of my closet, behind winter boots I had outgrown. It was not clever. It was just the best hiding place a child could invent while afraid. For a while it worked. Then the house changed. Not in big ways, not at first. My father donated my mother's clothes in black trash bags that smelled like lavender and dust. He boxed up her books. He threw away half-used notebooks from the kitchen drawer because, he said, we don't need clutter pretending to be memory. Elaine started coming by more often. She brought casseroles in glass dishes with masking tape labels on the lids. Chicken and rice, beef stew, lemon cake. She would stand in our kitchen and speak softly like grief was a sleeping baby. "You're doing so well," she told my father. He always looked tired when she said that, the right kind of tired, the kind people respected. Mark had changed by then too. He was 14, almost 15, and grief had made him quieter. Or maybe Dad had. Mark spent more time in the garage at practice at friends' houses. When he was home, he watched my father before answering questions. Once I asked him if he remembered the lake cabin. We were rinsing plates after dinner. Elaine was in the dining room helping my father sort sympathy cards into piles. Mark's hand froze under the faucet. "Don't bring that up," he said. "Why? Just don't. Mom had a picture of it." He turned the water off and looked toward the dining room. "Fiona, please." That please stayed with me. It was not annoyed, it was scared. By 16, the house had learned to function without my mother so smoothly that sometimes I felt like I was the only evidence she had ever lived there. Elaine had moved in by then, not officially at first, a sweater on the hallway hook, a toothbrush in the downstairs bathroom, her mail mixed with ours on the little table by the door. Then one morning she was making coffee in my mother's robe. Not the blue one, not the one I would have noticed immediately. But still, my father called it practical. "Elaine helps keep this house stable," he said. Stable was one of his favorite words, so was appropriate, so was family. I learned to hate words that sounded clean. The summer I turned 16, I started looking for my mother's things because I was afraid I was forgetting her voice. Not all of it, just the edges, the way she said my name when she was distracted, the way she laughed under her breath when something was only a little funny. I went into the study one afternoon while my father and Elaine were at a charity lunch. I know that sounds reckless. It was, but I wasn't looking for money or secrets. I was looking for her recipe cards. The black file cabinet was unlocked. That almost made me leave. Instead, I opened the second drawer. There were folders labeled by year: insurance, mortgage, medical, tax returns. My father's handwriting was precise, all hard angles and no wasted space. Then I saw a folder with my mother's maiden name on it. Lillian Mercer. Inside were copies of deeds, an old trust document, a property tax statement, and a photograph of the lake cabin. The same porch, the same uneven steps, the same dark line of trees behind it. My name was on one page. Fiona Elise Vale. I remember touching the paper with one finger, like it might vanish if I pressed too hard. There were notes in the margins, my father's handwriting. Beneficiary issue. Minor child. Requires signature at majority. I did not understand all of it, but I understood enough. The cabin was not just a memory. It was connected to me. Behind me the floor creaked. I turned and saw Richard in the doorway. He looked at the open drawer, then at the papers, then at me. He did not yell. That would have made it easier. "What are you doing?" he asked. I was looking for Mom's recipe cards. In my legal files. I saw her name. He walked in slowly and closed the folder. There was no slam, just the soft scrape of paper against paper. "You have been difficult lately," he said. I looked at him. Why is my name on that? His face did not change, but the air did. Because adults plan for children. What does requires signature mean? Enough. It was such a small word, but it filled the whole room. Elaine appeared behind him a few seconds later, holding her purse against her side. "What happened? Fiona has been going through private documents." Her eyes moved to me, then to the drawer, then back to him. "Oh. Just that. Oh, not surprise, not concern, recognition." That was the first time I realized Elaine already knew something I did not. My father told me to sit at the dining room table. He placed the folder in front of him, but not close enough for me to read. Elaine sat beside him, angled toward me like a school counselor. Mark stood in the kitchen doorway, keys in his hand, pretending he had not heard everything. "I asked a question," I said quietly. My father folded his hands. "You invaded privacy." "It had my name on it." "It had your mother's name on it," he said, "and your mother is gone." Elaine said, "Everyone grieves differently, Fiona." I looked at Mark. He looked down. That hurt more than my father's voice. Richard leaned back in his chair. "This is exactly what I was worried about. You are fixating. You are making connections that are not healthy." "I'm not making connections, I read my name." "You read things you don't understand. And you won't explain them." His eyes hardened then, just a little. "Because you are 16 and you are acting like a child." The next week my phone stopped working. My father said there had been an issue with the plan. Then he said I needed fewer distractions. Then he said family trust had to be rebuilt. Each explanation replaced the last one so smoothly that arguing with him felt like chasing paper in the wind. Elaine drove me to school instead of letting me take the bus. Mark stopped meeting my eyes at breakfast. Relatives called less, or maybe I was no longer allowed to answer. One afternoon I found my closet rearranged. The old backpack was still there. Empty. The blue cedar box was gone. I stood in my room with my hands hanging at my sides, listening to Elaine vacuum downstairs like nothing in the world had happened. That night, Richard came in and said I would be staying with a woman named Mrs. Keller for a while, a friend of the family, a retired teacher 2 counties over. Why? Because this house needs peace. I didn't do anything. You are damaging the family, Fiona. He said it gently, that was the worst part. Mark was in the hallway when I carried my duffel bag downstairs. I waited for him to say something, anything. He only whispered, "Just do what Dad says." Mrs. Keller's house smelled like boiled vegetables and carpet cleaner. I was told it was temporary. I was told I needed structure. I was told not to contact anyone until things calmed down. When I tried anyway, my aunt's number rang once and disconnected. My cousin's email bounced back. Mark's phone went straight to voicemail until one day it stopped accepting messages. I thought they had chosen silence. I thought my father had convinced them I was difficult, ungrateful, unstable. I did not know that while I was sitting in a borrowed bedroom, wearing the same 3 sweaters and waiting for someone to come get me, my family had received a message from me. A cruel one. A final one. A message I never wrote. "I think someone reused you." Detective Alvarez said it quietly. That made it worse. Loud things can be dismissed later as panic. Quiet things stay exactly where they land. I went home that evening and did not turn on the television. I did not call anyone. I took a yellow legal pad from my work bag, cleared the kitchen table and started writing dates. My real birthday. My mother's death. The day I found the folder in Richard's study. The day my phone stopped working. The day the blue box disappeared. The day I was sent to Mrs. Keller's house. The death filing. The second birthday. The property transfer attempt. I wrote slowly. I left space between each line. I added question marks where I had memory but no document. Then I opened a folder on my laptop and named it Fiona Proof. It looked ridiculous when I typed it. Then it didn't. I saved screenshots of every message. I took photos of the detective's business card. I wrote down the exact wording Richard had used. "Be careful. You don't understand what you're stirring up. You always had a difficult relationship with the truth." Those sentences looked different on paper, smaller somehow, less powerful when they were not coming from his mouth. The next morning I had 14 missed calls. 2 from unknown numbers. 1 from Elaine's. 1 from Mark. The rest were relatives I had not spoken to in years. My Aunt Caroline sent the first message. "I don't know what's happening, but people are upset. Please don't make this harder than it already is." I read it twice. Harder for who? I did not send that. Instead, I screenshotted it and saved it. Richard called at 8:12. I let it ring once before answering. "Fiona," he said with that tired patience already in place, "this is getting out of hand." "What is?" "Calling people, upsetting Caroline, bringing police into private family matters." "They came to me. You could have handled it quietly." "I'm trying to." No, he said, you're trying to punish people who grieved you. There it was. Not denied. Redirected. I wrote the sentence down while he was speaking. You let them grieve me, I said. A pause. Then softer, you have no idea what those years were like. I looked at the legal pad, at the 2 birthdays sitting 12 lines apart. I know what they were like for me. He sighed, this family has suffered enough. That word again. Family. The word that always seemed to include everyone, except the person being asked to disappear. Elaine called after lunch. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted the pattern complete. Her voice was gentle, careful, the kind of gentle that made room for blame. I know you feel wronged, she said. I was declared dead. I'm not saying mistakes weren't made. What kind of mistake gives someone a second birthday? She inhaled lightly. Fiona, people moved on because they had to. Your father nearly broke under what happened. What did happen? You left. I looked out the kitchen window. A delivery truck idled across the street. Someone carried groceries into a house. Ordinary life continued with no respect for revelation. I was sent away. That isn't how people remember it. People remember what they were told. Elaine's voice cooled by 1 degree. You should be careful not to confuse truth with the version that helps you survive. I saved that sentence too. By evening, Mark texted me. We should talk settlement before you embarrass yourself. Settlement. Not apology. Not explanation. Settlement. I stared at that word for a long time. It told me more than a confession would have. I wrote back, settlement for what? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Don't play dumb, you want money. Just say the number and stop dragging the family through this. I did not respond. But my hands shook after I put the phone down. Not because I was afraid of Mark. Because I remembered him at 12, standing by the bike racks, making a boy apologize for calling me weird. I remembered waiting for him in the hallway with my duffel bag, hoping he would stop my father. People do not always betray you all at once. Sometimes they do it in installments. Over the next 2 days, the messages kept coming. A cousin I barely remembered wrote, "Is this really Fiona or some scam?" Another said, "Your dad was destroyed when you died. Why would you do this to him?" Someone else sent, "We all read what you wrote back then. You don't get to come back now and act innocent." That one made me sit down. "We all read what you wrote." I typed carefully. "Can you send me the message?" No reply. I asked Caroline the same thing. She responded hours later. "I don't have it anymore. Richard printed it and showed people. I couldn't keep looking at it." Printed it? Of course he had. Paper looked official. Even pain looked more believable when my father put it in a folder. I added another line to the timeline. Fabricated message printed and distributed. That night, Detective Alvarez called and asked if anyone had contacted me in a way that felt threatening. I almost laughed again. "Define threatening," I said. He did not laugh. "Ms. Vale. Richard told me to be careful. Mark brought up settlement. Elaine is using therapy words like weapons." "That counts," he said. I wrote that down too. On the 3rd morning, I received an email from an address I did not recognize. The subject line was just my mother's name. Lillian's. For a minute, I could not open it. Not because I expected anything dramatic, because grief has strange locks. Sometimes a name is enough. The message was short. "Fiona. You don't know me well, but I worked for your mother's attorney years ago. My name is Ruth Bell. Your Aunt Caroline gave me your email after I asked if the person contacting her had your eyes. I need to ask you something. Do you still have the blue cedar box?" I read that sentence until the words blurred. Then I wrote back. "No, it was taken." Her reply came 15 minutes later. "Then your mother was right to worry." I stood up from the kitchen table so quickly the chair scraped the floor. My apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that used to feel safe before all of this started. Another email arrived. Ruth wrote, "Your mother left instructions with our office before she died. Not formal estate instructions, personal ones. She said if you ever came looking, and especially if you came asking about the box, I was supposed to tell you one thing first." I did not breathe until I opened the rest. The blue cedar box was not destroyed. Then beneath that, one more line. "Your mother told me if you ever disappeared, I was supposed to wait until you came looking." I met Ruth Bell in the lobby of a small law office above a pharmacy. It was raining that morning, not hard, just enough to make the windows look tired. The building smelled like old carpet, printer toner, and the kind of coffee people drink because it is available, not because it is good. Ruth was in her 70s, small, straight-backed, white hair pinned at the nape of her neck. She wore a navy coat and carried a canvas tote against her body with both hands. She looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You have your mother's eyes," she said. I had heard that once before in Aunt Caroline's email. It hit differently in person. "Thank you for meeting me," I said. Ruth nodded toward a conference room. "Your mother trusted very few people near certain things. I should have contacted you earlier maybe, but she was specific. She said you would have to come looking." The room had shelves of binders and a copier humming in the corner. Ruth placed the tote on the table, then paused with her hand still on the strap. "I need you to understand," she said. "I didn't keep this from you to hurt you." I know. I did not know, not fully, but I knew she needed me to say it before she could continue. She took out a wrapped bundle, brown paper, twine, my name written across the top in my mother's handwriting. Fiona Elise. Not Fiona Vale. Just Fiona Elise. For a second, I was 9 years old again, sitting on my bed while my mother opened the lid and told me it held pieces of me. Ruth untied the twine. The blue cedar box was more faded than I remembered. There was a scratch on the corner. The paint had worn thin along the edges, but it was real, it had weight. It made a soft wooden sound when Ruth set it in front of me. I did not touch it right away. I thought I would cry when I saw it. I didn't. I just put both hands flat on the table and breathed until the room stopped tilting. Ruth said nothing. That was kind of her. When I opened the lid, the cedar smell was still there, fainter now, mixed with paper and age. The hospital bracelet lay on top. Fiona Elise Vale. My real birthday. Under it was the card with the yellow duck, the silver key tied in blue thread, the photograph of the lake cabin, my mother's note folded along the same crease. "You belong somewhere, even when people forget how to say it." This time underneath the note there was more. A sealed envelope. Copies of a trust document. A notarized letter. A property description for the cabin parcel. And a short handwritten page from my mother. Ruth watched me find it. "She added those after she became ill," she said. "She was afraid Richard would challenge anything formal if it looked too direct." I unfolded the page carefully. My mother's handwriting was weaker than I remembered, but it was still hers. "Fiona, if you are reading this, someone has tried to make you doubt what belongs to you. Start with your birthday, then follow the key." I read that line 3 times. Start with your birthday, then follow the key. Ruth slid a folder across the table. "Your mother believed the cabin was the safest thing she could leave you, not because it was worth a fortune, because it was separate. Her family's line, her records, her attorney. And Richard knew." Ruth's mouth tightened. "He asked questions after she died." "What kind?" The kind people ask when they already know the answer and want to know who else knows." I took photos of everything before I moved a single document. Front and back, dates, signatures, notary stamp, parcel number, my mother's name, my name. Ruth noticed. "Good," she said. That small word steadied me more than comfort would have. Detective Alvarez met me later that afternoon. This time we did not sit in the conference room at my job. We met at the station, in a plain interview room with a metal table and a clock that made every minute sound official. He put on gloves before handling the documents. That detail stayed with me. My father had treated my identity like clutter. The detective treated it like evidence. After nearly an hour, Alvarez leaned back and said, "These documents matter." I already knew, but hearing him say it made my stomach drop. He pointed to the trust language, then to the dependent record connected to Elaine's family, then to the attempted property transfer. "This looks like your death record made the transfer cleaner. No living beneficiary to notify. No challenge from you. The alternate birthday gave them another way to route identity verification through a dependent file." In plain words. His face softened slightly. In plain words, someone benefited from you being gone. I looked at the blue box sitting beside my bag. Gone. Not missing. Not grieving. Gone. By evening, Richard knew. I don't know whether Ruth's office received a call, or whether Mark had someone watching county filings, or whether fear simply travels faster in families than truth does. But at 7:03 Richard called. "Meet me," he said. "No, Fiona. No private meetings." His voice lowered. "You have no idea what you're about to do." "I know exactly what I'm doing. You're going to destroy Elaine over paperwork she didn't understand. You're going to ruin Mark's future over old grief. Caroline's health is fragile. Your grandmother is 86. Do you want to be responsible for what this does to people?" I stood in my kitchen, looking at the yellow legal pad still open on the table. "I'm not responsible for what you did." He went quiet. Then, for the first time, he sounded less like a father, and more like a man running out of exits. "I kept this family together. You kept me out of it." Mark texted 20 minutes later. "Name a number, sign something, then disappear like you already wanted to." I saved it. Elaine left a voicemail. Her voice was shaking, but not with grief, with anger she was trying to polish. "People survived losing you, Fiona. You don't get to come back and punish them for surviving." I saved that too. The next morning, I gave Detective Alvarez copies of everything Ruth had given me. I kept the originals secured exactly where he told me to. Then I went home and wrote one statement for the family. No insults. No accusations I could not support. Just dates. Records. The death filing. The second birthday. The box. My mother's letter. I was halfway through the final paragraph when Richard called again. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. His voice was quiet. Almost gentle. "You survived, Fiona," he said. "Why is that enough?" I sat with the phone in my hand until the screen went dark. Then I saved the voicemail. And kept writing. I finished the statement just after midnight. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the small sound my laptop keys made when I corrected a date. I read the whole thing 3 times. No insults. No guesses. No begging anyone to believe me. I wrote what I knew. I wrote that I had not run away. I wrote that I had not died. I wrote that the message they were shown when I was 16 did not come from me. I attached copies of what Detective Alvarez said I could share. Not everything, just enough. The death filing. The alternate birthday. The trust page with my name. A photograph of the blue cedar box. My mother's letter. Then I sent it to Caroline first. After that, to the relatives whose emails I had found. I did not send it to Richard. He already knew. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then my phone began lighting up. Some messages were short. "Fiona, I am so sorry. I didn't know. I believed him." Others were not apologies at all. "This is too much. Your father was grieving. Why are you doing this now?" One cousin wrote, "We all saw the email. You said horrible things." I replied with one sentence. "Please send me a copy if you have it." 37 minutes later, she did. It was a scanned printout, folded once, faded at the edges. The words sounded nothing like me. Too cruel. Too clean. Too much like someone trying to make sure nobody would look closer. I don't want any of you. Stop pretending we were ever family. I read it once. Then I closed my laptop and sat still for a while. Not because I believed it. Because for 11 years they had. That was the part I had to let myself feel. Not all at once, just enough to name it. By the end of the week, Detective Alvarez told me the case had widened. He did not give me every detail, he couldn't, but he said the documents from the box changed the direction of the investigation. The death record, the attempted transfer, the dependent file tied to Elaine's family, Mark's messages, Richard's voicemail. All of it mattered. Consequences did not arrive like thunder. They arrived like mail. A certified letter. A notice of inquiry. A call from an attorney. A resignation from one of Richard's local boards. People stopped asking him to speak at fundraisers. Elaine deleted her social media. Mark sent one last message that said, "You have no idea what you've cost us." I did not answer. That was one of the first peaceful decisions I remember making. Richard never confessed to me, not directly. Men like my father rarely hand you the dignity of a clean admission. He sent messages through other people. He said things had been misunderstood. He said he had made difficult choices during a painful time. He said families were complicated. He never said I lied. But the documents said it for him. And for once, his voice was not the loudest thing in the room. Caroline called me 3 days after I sent the statement. She cried before she spoke. I did not know what to do with that. For years I had imagined family grief as something that had happened without me. Hearing it through the phone felt strange, like touching a bruise I thought had healed. "I looked for you," she said. I closed my eyes. That was the sentence I had been most afraid to want. When, I asked. After the email, I didn't believe it, not completely. Your mother always said you got quiet when you were scared, not cruel. I pressed my hand against the edge of the kitchen table. What happened? Richard told me you were unstable. He said contacting you would make it worse. Later. He told me you had died, and that pushing for details was hurting everyone. Her voice broke. I should have pushed anyway. I did not tell her it was fine. It was. I also did not punish her with silence. I needed to know someone wondered, I said. I did, she whispered. I did, Fiona. That did not fix 11 years. But it changed the shape of them. I had not been unloved by everyone. I had been kept from the people who might have loved me badly, imperfectly, too late, but still truly. The cabin was released to me months later, after paperwork and signatures and legal steps that were less dramatic than people think. There were forms, copies of identification, a probate attorney, a clerk who stamped 3 pages without looking up. The first time I drove there, I brought the blue cedar box in the passenger seat. The road narrowed near the lake. Trees crowded both sides, bare at the bottom and green above, like they had been waiting longer than I had. The cabin was smaller than the photograph made it look. The paint was peeling. One window had a crack in the corner. The porch sagged slightly on the left. It was not magical. That helped. I took the silver key from the box. The blue thread was still tied around it, faded almost white. For a second I expected it not to work. Then it turned. The door opened with a tired wooden sigh. Inside, the air smelled like dust, lake water, and closed rooms. A table stood near the window. There was an old green chair, a stack of chipped plates, and sunlight lying across the floor in a pale square. I set the blue cedar box on the table. Not as evidence. Not as leverage, not as proof for someone else. Just as mine. I opened it and took out my mother's note. You belong somewhere, even when people forget how to say it. The first time I read those words, I thought they meant I might be forgotten. Later, I thought they meant I had to prove I belonged. But sitting in that quiet cabin, with the lake moving softly beyond the trees, I understood something different. Belonging was not something Richard had given me. So it was not something he could take. I still keep my real birthday. I do not celebrate the false one. I do not mark the day the records said I died. Some relatives stayed away, some apologized badly, a few stayed. I learn not to measure peace by how many people finally understood. Sometimes peace is just opening a door with a key your mother saved for you. Sometimes it is putting a blue box on a table and letting it be only a blue box. And sometimes silence stops meaning abandonment. Sometimes, after everything, silence is just the sound of no one rewriting your life anymore.